So first off, talk to me about that. Start of poetry. Poetry, huh? Where
Poetry, man.
poetry, man. Talk to me about your relationship to poetry at the beginning. What was it like for you at the beginning?
Well, I didn't really have that much exposure to poetry at the beginning.
Mm.
I just studied it at school a little bit, like everyone has to. But the first time I ever wrote anything mildly poetic was kind of, I used to call it descriptive writing. And I just write really metaphorical, descriptive things. But I remember like the first formed poem I ever wrote was when I was in Europe. I had a very weird post-school launch into life, and it meant that I spent a very large amount of time alone. And so I started writing when I was doing that, and I wrote a poem about mountains that I was looking at, and that was kind of the beginning, but I never thought that I'd start sharing it.
So the descriptive writing, what was it? What was the impetus like? Where did that come from? Obviously, you said was that you were alone and you were thinking. Was it like just awe of these mountains, or where did it come from?
I think extreme emotion and wanting to find a comparison to it, like wanting to see something external that could describe or relate or compare to how I felt inside. And I've always used very strong metaphors with like nature. I mean, to the point where I mock myself about it, and my friends probably also mock me too, because I'm always comparing stuff to nature. But I think that's because that's where it all started. And I remember I wrote this poem. It was about this mountainscape in Innsbruck in Austria. I was trying to get a job there, and I didn't get it, and I was really sad. And it was like I did a lot of job auditions. We're talking over 50 for work. Yeah, and it was really tiring. And I remember I just sat there and I looked at the snow, and the snow was really grim. Like it was melting away. It was like tired. And then there was like really fancy snow above that was really fresh. And I was like, that snow couldn't choose where it landed. Neither could I. So then it became a poem.
I love that. I love that so much because I relate to that idea of when you see things. And I know we were talking about before about how I feel like poets have a very unique way of viewing the world. Like you could see a snow, two different types of snows, and you see a poem in that. Someone sees it and goes, "I need to get inside. It's too cold." We have a very different way of viewing the world.
This has so much meaning.
This has so much meaning. You see a leaf, you're, oh my God, what does this mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like in that, and I think that's what I want to focus on today for the broad topic of this conversation. I want to try to dig into that for people to understand how the mind of a poet works that way, that descriptive kind of like representation of things.
Yeah.
Like I'm fascinated by how that works for other people, and I'm trying to kind of really kind of delve into that. But on the topic of you obviously starting that, descriptive poem. So when did that start from that to change from like, okay, now I'm writing poetry? Well, how was that shift for you?
I feel like it's difficult to talk about that shift without you knowing more about me and like my life, because I think it's very like it's very hand in hand. Like I used to be a ballet dancer, and a lot of the time I spent alone was me traveling, trying to get work, because that's how it is. And so that was when I first started to write stuff. But the thing is that I then had to stop very abruptly, and then I spent a lot of time after I'd stopped just feeling so incapable of expression. And like when your whole like work, your income, your life is all around just daily expression, and you suddenly don't have an outlet for that anymore. That's when I think it shifted for me. And I think that I wasn't very well for a period of time. And so there was a combination of seeing inspiration online and sort of seeing artists that I thought were just so like they really moved me, but also I thought to myself, like, I have a lot of that in me. And so I would just get to these headspaces, to be honest, a lot of negative headspaces, and then I'd find ways to write about that in ways that felt beautiful. And how could I make this thing that's really painful actually like a very sort of not femme fatale or whatever, but like how do I shape it? I mean, it's hard to even talk about because it's more of a locked in hypnotic kind of that. I don't find that I'm particularly conscious when I'm writing my best work. I'm just in a daydream scribbling. If I ever try and sit down and just write and make that shift, it's never as good.
I completely agree, and I want to touch on that point too. I feel like I have this idea. It was a saying that I say, it's like ideas have people. I think especially when you're writing a poem that means so much to you, it feels like it brews in the back of your mind for so long, months even, without you kind of having the clarity.
Without you knowing, yeah.
And then once you feel that, it's the feeling. It's a really intangible feeling of like, oh, it's kind of ready to come out now, and you just kind of have to just allow yourself to kind of like express that, you know. And I think the skill is in understanding how and when to, like, what to keep. Almost like, okay, how do I form this? You know, in my mind always is like I'm crossing a river and I'm stepping on stones throughout the river, and some stones I'll sink, but some stones will be right, kind of like, you know. And it's like what I use a word or a phrase like that's not quite right, you know. That's not what I'm trying to say, and then.
So you're someone that builds it brick by brick with your writing?
It builds brick by brick in my mind, but when it comes out to writing it, it just all...
That's nice.
It's very difficult for me to like build it and sit, like you were saying, sit down and try to like formulate it. Because I'm like, what? I don't have anything to say almost, you know?
That's why it's a shit hobby. It's not a hobby. Because you can't say, this is my biggest frustration with poetry. You can't decide to sit down and do some poetry. It just doesn't work like that. I don't think, not for me and maybe for some people, but I can't be like, oh, I'm going to spend a nice afternoon back for myself, write some poetry. No. No, it's always when I'm on a really crappy street where someone's just stolen something and I'm like, oh, I've got an idea, and then I got to sit down and like, or on a really horribly crowded train, or like when I'm really, really upset about something. And then suddenly it comes and there's the thought and it's there in 10 seconds. And unless I write it down or record my voice or whatever, it's gone.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I'll write down a few key words and think I'll return to it, and then I never find it again.
There's so many poems, so many lines. Like I think it's exactly the same. That have like lines. I'm like, oh, that's a really good line, but it doesn't find a home anywhere because it doesn't mean anything.
Because it's not about words.
Yeah.
It's not about words. It's about meaning.
It's about meaning.
That's the bottom line, I think. Although I'm no expert.
I mean, we write poetry. That's all we say. We don't need to be experts on that. But you mentioned like at the beginning you were like inspired by people that you would watch. Talk to me about that period. Like, what was it? What kind of people were you watching? How were they inspiring you?
Yeah. So I came across. I'm very strong believer that of social media it really can be a facilitator for good and for creation. And I think there was that period of time. Maybe people remember it when, like, between about 2015 and 2019, 2020. Instagram was a very different place. It was such a place to put lovely pictures on, and people would see them, or like create a little video 3 minutes long. People could watch it. Like, that was a period of time where a lot of art was booming online, and it was really good for people who were at-home artists or freelancers who weren't, didn't have an open scratch night or anything. And I think during that time, I came across some online poets. Namely one, like, I want to shout them out, but everyone's going to know who they are. It's Whitney Hansen. But she is gorgeous to watch and so talented. And every single word hit with me, and just her experiences. And I remember I went through a period of time where I had an anthology already of about 30 poems. And I started trying to record them and write them and perform them. And I recorded every single one of them. And they still sit in my drafts today because I never shared them because I didn't feel confident enough to share them, and I didn't like how I looked at the time, and I was dealing with symptoms and stuff. But I have them still, all the original recordings of when I felt it and who I was when I wrote them. And now when I share them, it's just such a different experience, like we were talking about earlier. The difference between performing on a feeling and acting a previous sentiment is a very different experience.
That's so fascinating to me, especially that the inspiration. For me, like, my inspiration was George the Poet. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, I haven't.
So he's like, again, he was also a poet that you would perform online. And I think it was such a... I think I related to him so much because, A, he was from the kind of place I was from, but he was able to kind of describe the things I would see, but in words.
Well, I might have heard of him actually, but I'm more of a face recognizer. So.
Yeah, you probably recognize this.
Yeah.
I mean, the name like George the Poet is pretty like not that memorable. But no, I feel like it was, and that's kind of when I kind of understood that this was a way of self-expression. I've always known poetry to be Shakespeare. I love reading. I love classics, and I think for me, poetry was always the classics. Robert Frost, Whitman. Like
Hardy for me.
Yeah,
Hardy for me for sure.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit depressing, but like I think that's the irony. Like, there you go. Like I studied the only poet I really studied at school was Thomas Hardy.
Yeah.
And all of his poems are so bleak, but then some of them are so strong in image, like, and a lot of them are very, centralized around nature and those metaphors and the passage of time. And like, I think that really influenced me. That and bloody Jane Austen. Like, I'm not a big reader, and I wish that I was, but my mind is too manic to settle on a text. But I was, for a period of time, able to settle on some things, and Austen was up there. And again, it's very quaint, but it's really clever and it's funny. And I mean, everybody knows that. I don't need to say that, but I think that is a big inspiration. But namely, the sharing spoken word was definitely from online.
When you saw it, did you immediately think, oh, I could do this? Or was it just like a interest or curiosity at the beginning that you kind of slowly built up on?
I think it was a fixation. I think it became something that was very comforting to me, and something that I think being exposed to very sensitive, outwardly sharing people that I hadn't yet met. I hadn't met them in my workforce. I hadn't met them in my personal life. I'd always been the most sensitive friend, the most vulnerable friend, the one that would always overshare or get emotional about everything. And then to find people like that online, I think I felt a likeness, and I felt like almost like a companionship, not in a like, oh, you're now my friend, but like I was mesmerized, very mesmerized by them. And then I think probably quite quickly I was like, I could do that, maybe. I could try. I'm a performer and I like that. And But it took me another couple years after that first inspiration and first time I recorded everything to actually go back and start again and build up a whole presence and name for myself. When I say name for myself, I mean actually like a name that I want for myself in poetry. And that took a heartbreak to do that.
Always does.
Always does.
For every poet.
Yeah.
So it's so cursed.
Yeah.
But okay, you mentioned the anthologies that you put together, and you started like recording really, really early on before you even kind of started that. When you were writing that anthology, what was the feeling? And the reason I asked that, right, is that I always feel like, for me, my first poem was like a build up of so much emotions. Like once I realized that this was a thing where I could unpack prior memories or prior feelings or prior situations I'd been through in my life, it was like a real long build up of this thing. And I'd had this poem which is like 3-4 minutes long that I'd written over like course of like 6 months, but it was like a really like long, and I kind of like made a metaphor of me having conversations, did my aspirations and my talents that I thought I had in the form of a ghost and dream. And so it was like, for me, it was like unpacking stuff.
When you say you had it building up and brewing, do you mean like the words are brewing, or just the feelings that then eventually you needed to put into words?
I think the second part. It was the feelings
yeah.
So like I felt like I understood. It gave me an opportunity to go back and like reflect on a lot of feelings that I had that I just wouldn't have the voice.
Wouldn't have had it, yeah.
Exactly, like to be able to like explain it, right? And so like after I understood that, I was like, oh, okay, this thing that I thought about, this relationship that happened, or this thing, perspectives that I had, I can actually now verbalize it. I can actually use words to kind of describe that situation.
You're now ready to.
I'm ready to kind of like.
There is such a big difference between that, I feel.
Did you feel like similar for you when you're writing the anthology, or was it completely different?